Hello and welcome to Hastings Community TV, channel number 15. I'm Terry Swanson and I'm here today with Superintendent of the Hastings School System, Mr. Tim Collins. Welcome, Tim.
Thank you for doing this one more time and the final time before the vote on November 7th.
No problem. Today we're going to do a recap of the bond issue and the operating levy that will be voted on next week by the public. We're kind of going to go through as many things as we can without confusing the issue and stay to some of the core points of why we need the bond issue and certainly why we need the operating levy. So I'm going to let you take a start at this, Tim, and I'll just kind of interject where I got questions or concerns.
Well, thank you, and I think that, again, you can't rehearse a show like this, so it's we talk about some of the slides before we go on the air, but it's really giving a gut reaction or your own personal take on the information that we're looking at. There's nothing that's going to be new or earth-shattering in this presentation. It's really the week before the vote, and we're, as I've been talking to people, as I've been getting emails and phone calls about the bond and the levy, this show really focuses back on some of the core issues that we've been talking about. And really the first thing is, why again are we going for this vote on November 7th? What is really driving the bond issue? And on the screen, it's really the new high school that we're seated in today. A beautiful facility, a great asset for our community, from all the events that get held here to the walking track, etc. But from 5 blocks away, it looks really good. You come to a performing arts theater, it looks really good. You come to a basketball game, wrestling match, it looks really good. But when you start looking at some of the infrastructure of it, it's now time. And we've been talking about the roof that's leaking, and on the screen right now are just a few of the pictures. This happened about 2 weeks ago. The one picture shows a hole up in the ceiling. That's where water was leaking through in our choir room. The other 2 pictures shows a grand piano that we had a little bit of light water damage, surface damage on. And again, we lucked out on this one as far as, the grand piano. Yep. We're going to be able to save that. But what if it would have happened over the weekend where the water kept running through? What's the damage doing to the rest of the building if we know that the water is running through? And I know that one of the questions I get asked all the time is, how is it possible that the roof is leaking at the high school? and it's a very good question, because on your home you put on a roof and it's not supposed to be leaking after 15 years, right. 16 years. This roof on the high school, when it was built, it was a roof that had a life expectancy of 15 years. We did purchase a warranty on the roof, and over time we've used that warranty. There's been people that have come out and patched it. But the warranty isn't one where if you have a leak in one corner of the roof that you get a whole new roof then.
Right.
The warranty is that we'll come out and fix it, and we will stay there until we can get the leak fixed at that time. So definitely this is one of the driving forces behind the bond issue.
And we got to remember that our quote-unquote new high school is not a new high school anymore. That high school is almost 25 years old.
It's nearing on 20. 20?
Yeah. 20 years old. So I know that time flies for everybody, and the new high school is no longer a new high school.
That's right. And the other thing that I get asked is, well, Tim, we need to do $50 million, $49.5 million worth of deferred maintenance, reinvestment, et cetera. Why hasn't the board, why haven't you, I've been here 15 years now, mm-hmm. Why haven't you been doing maintenance as we go? And we have. We meet every year. We prioritize basically what we can do with $361,000. We get about $1 million each year from the state of Minnesota for capital. 15 years ago, we got $1 million.
So that hasn't increased.
It hasn't increased, and I think the cost of doing a sidewalk, I think the cost of carpeting, I think the cost of redoing a roof has gone up a little bit over the last 15 years.
And it has, and that goes back to an issue when you and I first met 15 years ago, the fact that the state itself has turned a lot of the responsibility for funding over to the local school districts instead of doing it themselves, saying, if you want any of these things done, then go get your community to support it. So,
And part of the formula for getting capital dollars from the state of Minnesota is how many students you have. And the age of your buildings, et cetera, that's part of the formula as well. But the high school doesn't care if there's 2,000 in here or 1,500. The roof doesn't change its size because of the number of students. So we've been doing the maintenance. We spend about $360,000 a year. As you know, that doesn't go very far. And the next slide shows we are just like every other school and every other community. They too don't have enough capital dollars to do their deferred maintenance. And so the system is set up that schools and communities, and I've said this before, about every 10 years, go for a major bond vote. A bond is for buildings, a levy is for learning, and the screen again shows that we're like every other community. We are going for a major investment. And every one of those communities on the screen has a different story.
right. And I'll just go through one more time, and we did this the last time we met. When you start looking at the difference between a bond issue and an operating levy, look at your own household. If you're going to re-roof your house, that'd be part of a bond issue. Your monthly electric bill is an operating cost, an operating levy type issue.
I think though that, again, people need to understand the system. The board and myself, our custodial staff, our maintenance staff, we do as much maintenance as we can with what we have, but it is limited, and that's why we do go for a bond vote. And I think that another thing that I've been talking about in the community is, well, is this a new increased tax or not? Because I've been saying that by voting yes on the bond issue, your taxes aren't going to go up. And some people have said, well, Tim, really they are, because in 2021, when the high school would be paid for, your taxes would go down, so therefore your taxes are going up from that point. And I get their point, but overall, your overall net tax of your tax of what it's going to for facilities is going to stay the same.
Yeah, and instead of saying a tax increase, whatever, and you and I have talked about this, is that you're going to pay no more taxes by passing this bond issue for the next 3 years, and going beyond that 3 years, you're not going to pay any more taxes than what you're paying today. Yes, it would go down if once the high school is paid for, but the reality is most things don't go down, and if we can get all these things done without anybody paying more in taxes either tomorrow or 4 years from now, I think that's a good deal.
At this point, when we were going through the slides, I didn't have a slide on this, but you said that you did want to touch on it lightly because you've been hearing about this in the community. There's many things many projects that make up the $49.5 million. Todd Field is one of those projects. Overall, it's roughly about $3.2 million of that $49.5 million, and you did say that you wanted to, even though I don't have a slide on it.
Well, that's fine. I mean, here's what I looked at is that when Tim and I talked about Todd Field, and that had been brought up a few times at some of the wide variety of meetings that he's had, is I kind of looked at that and said, well, number one, it's a very historic athletic facility that we have in this town. It is on the busiest corner in this town with the junction of 65 and 51. And the public itself has not really put money into that facility for decades. But that facility certainly has improved over the decades. There is a new scoreboard, there's bleachers, there's lights, and the various other things that have been done at that athletic complex have been done through private funding. And the one thing that hasn't been done in private funding in the past is the surface of the field. And we need to do something with the surface of the field, not only because it's in terrible shape, and the people you had on the committee for the bond issue were taken down there by turf experts and shown that. But the other thing is that by replacing that surface, is that we now get to use that facility, which, like I said, every kid that ever grew up in this town wants to play in that facility. We have girls and boys athletics there. We have soccer, we have lacrosse, we have football, we have all these different facilities, and right now we're kind of guarding that sod for like one sport. Well, now we can use it for multiple sports, not only at the high school level, but at the youth levels. And other things, and it's not just athletics, is that right now we have our band that practices in the asphalt parking lot in the middle of the summertime, okay? You replace that surface, and all of a sudden that's an opportunity where if our band wants to start practicing on Todd Field, McNamara Stadium, go for it. So it's things like that, and it's the first time, like I said, the big issue is it's the first time in many decades that anybody's ever gone to the public to upgrade that facility.
As you said earlier, the public contribution has been donations from phone calling and volunteers, et cetera. So thank you for sharing that perspective as well. Now we're sliding into the operating levy and our school district taxes combined. You know, for me, this graph shows that the Hastings School District, we did build up a fund balance. I was here in 2003 when we were in the hole.
Big time.
We were in the red, we were in statutory operating debt. And you go back to 2003 and 2005, and you were part of those levy votes. There were promises made. And those promises were made by myself, and those promises were made by board members back then, that with an increase in the operating levy, we will look to build up a savings account for a rainy day when we need it. We will look to use that savings account to lower our class sizes, and we will look to use those operating levy dollars to try to keep as many of the programs that we can. And to me, what this graph shows is that we fulfilled our promise. Back in 2003, 2005, we've dug ourselves out of the red. We've created a savings account. We've been able to make some very wise decisions over time. And I share this because I think that you have to be able to walk the talk, and I think this graph helps to show that we have walked the talk. Those things have come true. We've done what we said that we had hoped we could. You never know. You're making a promise when you're in the hole, when you're in the red. But definitely those promises have come true. And you know, the number one thing is that continues to drive our financial situation. You know, the state of Minnesota, there was a lag there for about 6 years where they did not give. That really helped cause communities have to give more on the operating levy side. But then combine that with our declining enrollment, and I think you said it best earlier, declining enrollment means declining revenue.
And they're not, what's really interesting in a school system, and again, I like to make the comparison to a household, is that your household expenses, let's say you have a family of 5 people and one of them leaves, is that now you got a household of 4 people. Your expenses do not go down if that person was contributing to the revenue side. They don't go down equal. Is that our revenue in declining enrollment certainly go down a lot more than what our expenses are capable of because of the same thing you have with the bond issue. The fixed cost or fixed expenses, I'll say, don't go away just because you lose 200 kids. I mean, you still got to heat the buildings, you still got to maintain the buildings, you still need to pay the staff, and you start spreading that loss of student population amongst 12, 13 grades, and I mean, even 25 in a grade, you start having numbers like this showing up, and you really didn't decrease any of your expenses for the most part.
Well, if our enrollment had stayed level over the last 4 years, we wouldn't be coming for an increase in our operating levy right now. We'd have enough money to operate, we'd be able to keep our class sizes low, and definitely this shows the continued pattern of the, as you said, not only declining enrollment, you should word it as declining revenue because of it. And again, this is, people, you have your school district taxes, your county taxes, and your city taxes. These are the total dollars that come into us from our local taxes for the school. And you can see that back in 2010, 7 years ago, we're getting in about 7.5 million. Last year we're getting in about 7.5 million, and 5 years from now we'll be getting in about 7.5 million. That means that our local business owners, homeowners, and ag owners have not seen an increase in their local school district taxes, and if it is, it's been very minimal. In fact, over the past 5 years, typically you'd say school districts have increased by 1%, 2%.
Right.
This graph shows that they've increased, well, really, they haven't increased.
They've decreased.
They decreased. In the last 5 years, our school district taxes overall have decreased.
I'm going to stop you just for a second, Tim, because I know that we run into this all the time too, is that when you're looking at your property tax statement, you have to look at each individual line. You can't go to the bottom and say, well, that's not true. I mean, you need to look within the body of your property tax statement and isolate the line that shows for the schools, and that'll confirm the various slides that Tim has put together.
Right, and this slide says right what you're talking about. The person with a $200,000 home, they don't pay just $906 in taxes. Their total taxes are probably $2,500.
Mm-hmm.
But we took out just the school district portion, and again, this validates what I'm saying. Over a 10-year history, a $200,000 home, their school district property taxes have gone up about $19, $1.90 a year.
Not even.
A $270,000 home, they've gone up about 40 to 50 bucks over a 10-year history. So again, in a decade, the school district taxes have stayed relatively flat.
Yep.
That doesn't mean that you should automatically give the school more money just because they've stayed flat.
No, I'll agree with that, and I think that's part of this whole process too, is that between the school board and guys like me, Nag and Tim once in a while, is that the accountability factor is certainly one of the things that enters into this whole thing, is that there are multiple checks to make sure that we're just not throwing money up in the air to see where it blows. It's very well thought out.
I think the final, for me, closing of confidence from the community is we had 20 volunteers. Not one of them were recruited. Their names are up there. People who are watching this program right now, they can take the time to see if they know some of those individuals. I would say about 8 of those individuals don't have children in school anymore. But yet, all of them unanimously said, school board, you need to do something right now. You need to do something in the year 2017, and this is what we're proposing. And the school board agreed with them.
Now, if I remember right, initially, Tim, that number was quite a bit higher. But after going through, again, multiple meetings and sifting through the priorities, that was taken down to that $49+ million on that bond issue, so that we could sit here and make the statement today that your taxes in 3 years from now are not going to be any different than what they are
yes,
today.
This group actually identified originally $74 million worth of projects.
That's what I thought.
But they knew that they couldn't tell their neighbor and their friends, hey, we need to do all 74 million right now. So then they came with, I want to say it was around 52 million, and the board again pared it down to the 49.5 million. But again, I think it's the, I hate to use the cliches, the American way, grassroots from the bottom up. But this group and their names behind it say that this just isn't coming from Tim Collins, who, of course, I want the best for our schools.
Right.
This isn't coming just from the school board that, well, absolutely they want the community to reinvest. This is from members themselves of the community who spent over 5 months going through all of our facilities and then bringing forth their recommendation. And that's why I feel positively as we look forward to November 7th.
Perfect.
And with that, I don't know if you want to close, go ahead. I think.
You want me to editorialize on my son here too?
Go ahead, I don't care what you're going to do.
Not everybody gets to do this, so I got to do this, okay? It's my youngest son's 16th birthday today, so happy birthday, Jay, before we close this thing out. We thank you for watching, and we certainly hope you get out and vote next week. And if you have any questions, as always, you can contact Tim at the school, you can go online, you can see the information. But I think everything that's been out there in the numerous meetings that have taken place throughout the community, it's been opened up for questions, and from my standpoint, it looks like just the logical thing to do for the sake of the school system, which is certainly one of the key components of any community. So,
Thank you again for giving of your time to help get the word out.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you.